Welcome to Beyond the Written Words, where history speaks, legends come alive, and every story reveals a truth that time could never erase. Join us as we uncover the lives, mysteries, triumphs, and tragedies of the people who shaped our world. If you love compelling stories, hidden history, and unforgettable journeys through time, you're in the right place. Now, let's step beyond the written words and into the story of Adolf Hitler. Imagine meeting a young man walking the streets of Vienna in 1908. His clothes are worn. His pockets are nearly empty. He carries a small portfolio filled with hand-drawn buildings, hoping someone will see talent where others have seen only failure. He sleeps wherever he can, eats only when he has enough money, and spends hours wandering museums, convinced that one day the world will know his name. No one around him could have imagined that within a few decades, this same man would ignite a war that engulfed continents, oversee a regime responsible for the murder of millions, and become one of the most infamous figures in human history. How does someone travel such a path? Was it destiny? Personal ambition? A series of historical crises? Or a combination of all three? This is not the story of a monster born that way. It is the story of how an ordinary human being, shaped by his choices, the society around him, and extraordinary historical circumstances, rose to absolute power. It is also the story of how those choices unleashed catastrophic consequences on Europe and the world. To understand Adolf Hitler, we must begin long before the war, before the rallies, before the uniforms and speeches. We must return to a quiet border town where nobody expected history to take such a dark turn. On April 20, 1889, in the small Austrian town of Braunau am Inn, a boy named Adolf Hitler was born. The town sat beside the Inn River on the border between Austria and Germany, an ordinary place that gave no hint it would one day be linked forever to one of history's darkest chapters. His father, Alois Hitler, worked as a customs official. He valued discipline, obedience, and order. His mother, Clara Hitler, was deeply devoted to her children and was known for her warmth and affection. Between these two influences, Adolf grew up in a household marked by both strict authority and gentle care. As a child, Adolf showed an interest in drawing. He especially enjoyed sketching buildings, churches, and landscapes. Teachers noticed his artistic ability, but they also described him as stubborn and increasingly resistant to authority. His father envisioned a stable government career for his son. Adolf wanted something entirely different. He dreamed of becoming an artist. Their disagreements became frequent. The more his father insisted on one future, the more Adolf resisted it. After Alois died in 1903, Adolf's determination to pursue art only grew stronger. When he was 18, he left home and traveled to Vienna, the glittering capital of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Vienna was one of Europe's great cultural centers, alive with music, architecture, literature, and political debate. For Adolf, it represented hope. He applied to the prestigious Academy of Fine Arts Vienna, believing acceptance would launch the career he had always imagined. Instead, he received devastating news. His application was rejected. The examiners believed his architectural sketches showed promise but concluded that his paintings lacked the artistic quality required for admission. Confident they had made a mistake, he applied again. He was rejected a second time. The dream that had defined his youth collapsed. With little money and few opportunities, Hitler drifted into poverty. He spent periods living in hostels and shelters for the homeless. To survive, he sold small watercolor paintings of Vienna's buildings to dealers and tourists. These difficult years exposed him to a city filled with competing political movements, intense nationalism, and widespread prejudice. Vienna at the beginning of the 20th century was a place where extreme ideas circulated openly in newspapers, speeches, and cafes. Historians continue to debate precisely how these years shaped Hitler's beliefs. What is clear is that they formed part of the environment in which many of his later ideas developed. By 1913, feeling increasingly disconnected from Austria, Hitler moved to Munich in Germany. He could not have known that Europe stood only months away from a catastrophe that would transform his life forever. In the summer of 1914, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand triggered a chain reaction among Europe's great powers. Within weeks, the continent was at war. For millions of young men, the First World War would become a nightmare. For Adolf Hitler, it would become the turning point that changed everything. The failed artist was about to become a soldier. And the path that eventually led to dictatorship had begun. The summer of 1914 arrived with an excitement few Europeans had ever experienced. Crowds filled city squares waving flags. Brass bands played patriotic songs. Newspapers predicted that the coming war would be short, glorious, and over before Christmas. Across Europe, young men volunteered in astonishing numbers, convinced they were about to take part in the greatest adventure of their generation. Among them was Adolf Hitler. Having recently moved from Austria to Munich, he eagerly sought permission to enlist in the Bavarian army. When war was declared, he believed he had finally found a purpose that had eluded him during his difficult years in Vienna. Soon, the romantic image of war vanished. The Western Front became a landscape of mud, shattered trees, endless trenches, and relentless artillery. Soldiers spent weeks surrounded by rats, disease, and the constant fear that the next shell would land only a few feet away. Machine guns, poison gas, and heavy bombardments turned battlefields into places of unimaginable destruction. Hitler served primarily as a dispatch runner, carrying messages between command posts. The work was dangerous. Communication lines were often destroyed, forcing runners to cross ground exposed to enemy fire. Many never returned. He survived. Several times, death came close. Shell explosions wounded him, and in 1918 he temporarily lost his eyesight after a gas attack. Throughout the war, he earned decorations for bravery, including the Iron Cross First Class, an award that was uncommon for someone of his rank. For Hitler, the army became more than military service. It offered discipline, identity, and belonging. Unlike the uncertainty that had defined his earlier years, military life gave him a clear role in a nation at war. But by late 1918, Germany's situation had become desperate. Years of fighting had exhausted the country. The economy was collapsing. Food shortages spread across cities. Soldiers were weary, and public confidence in victory had faded. Then came the news that changed everything. Germany had agreed to an armistice. The fighting stopped on November 11, 1918. For many Germans, the silence that followed was not a celebration but a shock. They had expected difficult negotiations, not total defeat. The German Empire collapsed, Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated, and a new democratic government inherited a nation facing political turmoil, economic hardship, and deep public anger. The Treaty of Versailles, signed the following year, imposed severe terms on Germany. The country lost territory, faced military restrictions, and accepted responsibility for the war while being required to pay significant reparations. Many Germans viewed the treaty as deeply humiliating. Political extremists from different ideologies sought to exploit this frustration. They offered simple explanations for complex problems and promised to restore national pride through radical change. Hitler found himself drawn into this turbulent world. Still wearing his military uniform, he remained in the army after the war, performing administrative duties in Munich. One assignment required him to attend political meetings and report on emerging groups. In September 1919, he entered a small gathering of the German Workers' Party. The meeting was modest. Only a handful of people attended. Yet before the evening ended, Hitler stood up to challenge one of the speakers. His passionate remarks caught the attention of the party's founders, who saw something unusual in the quiet former soldier, an ability to command attention through speech. They invited him to join. Neither they nor Hitler could have imagined that this tiny political organization would soon evolve into the Nazi Party, one of the most destructive political movements in modern history. The failed artist had become a decorated veteran. Now, he was about to reinvent himself once again. This time, as a politician. When Adolf Hitler walked into the meeting of the German Workers' Party in September 1919, there was little to suggest he had entered the room where history would change. The gathering was small. Fewer than 50 people sat on wooden chairs inside a Munich beer hall, listening to speeches about Germany's uncertain future. The party itself was barely known. It had almost no money, no national influence, and little chance of becoming a major political force. Yet Germany itself was changing rapidly. The First World War had ended, but peace had not brought stability. The new democratic government, the Weimar Republic, faced enormous challenges. Inflation eroded savings. Unemployment left families struggling. Veterans returned from the front to find a country very different from the one they had left. Many Germans felt anger, humiliation, and uncertainty after defeat and the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Political violence became increasingly common. Groups from across the political spectrum competed for influence, often clashing in the streets. In this atmosphere of fear and frustration, simple answers to complex problems became increasingly attractive to some people. Hitler quickly discovered that his greatest strength was not painting, but public speaking. At first, he spoke to only a handful of listeners. Then dozens. Then hundreds. He delivered emotionally charged speeches that promised national renewal, rejected the post-war settlement, and blamed various groups for Germany's problems. His rhetoric was rooted in extremist nationalist and anti-Semitic ideas that were false, dangerous, and deeply harmful. Nevertheless, they resonated with some audiences already searching for someone who claimed to offer certainty during chaotic times. The party leadership noticed his ability to captivate crowds. Within months, Hitler had become one of its most recognizable figures. As attendance at meetings grew, the organization reinvented itself. It adopted a new name, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, commonly known as the Nazi Party. Its symbols, uniforms, banners, and carefully staged rallies were designed to create a powerful sense of identity and unity among supporters. These visual elements, combined with disciplined organization and repeated messaging, became central to the party's strategy. Hitler understood something many politicians of his era did not. People were influenced not only by ideas, but also by emotion, spectacle, and repetition. Large gatherings featured music, flags, coordinated marches, and dramatic speeches. The events were intended to leave audiences with the feeling that they were witnessing the beginning of a national revival. At the same time, violence increasingly surrounded German politics. The Nazi Party developed paramilitary groups that frequently fought with political opponents in the streets. Such confrontations reflected the wider instability affecting Germany during the early 1920s. In November 1923, believing the moment had come to seize power, Hitler and his supporters attempted to overthrow the Bavarian government in Munich. The effort, later known as the Beer Hall Putsch, failed. Police confronted the marchers. Gunfire erupted. Several people were killed, and the attempted coup collapsed within hours. Hitler was arrested. To many observers, his political career appeared finished. Instead, the trial transformed him into a nationally recognized figure. He used the courtroom as a platform to present his views, attracting widespread newspaper coverage. Convicted of treason, Hitler was sentenced to prison. Yet his imprisonment proved surprisingly brief. While incarcerated, he dictated much of Mein Kampf, My Struggle, a book outlining many of his political beliefs and long-term ambitions. The work revealed his authoritarian vision, aggressive nationalism, expansionist goals, and deeply anti-Semitic ideology, ideas that would later shape the policies of the Nazi regime. After less than a year, Hitler was released. He had learned an important lesson. Attempting to seize power by force had failed. Winning power through Germany's political system, then dismantling that system from within, offered a far greater opportunity. The next stage of his journey would not be fought with rifles in the streets. It would be fought through elections, propaganda, and a nation growing increasingly desperate. The world had not yet realized how much was at stake. In the late 1920s, Adolf Hitler faced a problem that threatened to end his political ambitions. The Nazi Party existed. It held meetings, published newspapers, and attracted loyal followers. But in national elections, it remained a fringe movement. Most Germans simply were not interested. They had endured years of hardship, yet many still believed democracy could survive. Then, halfway around the world, a financial catastrophe changed everything. On October 29, 1929, later remembered as Black Tuesday, the New York Stock Exchange crashed. Within months, the economic shock spread across the globe. Banks failed. Businesses closed. International trade slowed dramatically. Germany was among the countries hit hardest. Its economy depended heavily on foreign loans, many of them from American banks. As those loans disappeared, factories shut down. Companies dismissed workers by the thousands. Families who had already survived one national crisis suddenly faced another. By the early 1930s, millions of Germans were unemployed. Long lines formed outside soup kitchens. Fathers walked city streets searching for jobs that no longer existed. Shopkeepers watched customers disappear. Savings vanished. Hope seemed to evaporate with it. For many ordinary people, democracy appeared unable to solve the crisis. The government changed repeatedly. Political parties argued while the economy deteriorated. Parliament became deadlocked. Every proposed solution seemed to create new problems. It was in this atmosphere of fear and uncertainty that extremist movements gained momentum. The Nazi Party promised decisive leadership, national unity, economic recovery, and the restoration of German pride. These promises were presented with carefully choreographed rallies, striking visual symbols, and relentless propaganda. Hitler traveled constantly. Night after night, he addressed audiences across Germany. Some meetings filled small halls. Others packed massive arenas. His speeches followed a familiar pattern. He began calmly, speaking about hardship that many listeners recognized from their own lives. As his speech progressed, his voice grew louder and more forceful. By the end, many supporters left believing they had witnessed someone capable of changing the nation's future. Historians note that these speeches often relied on emotional appeals, oversimplified explanations for Germany's problems, and false claims directed at targeted groups. They reflected a style of politics built on division and scapegoating rather than evidence. At the same time, the Nazi Party expanded its political machine. Volunteers knocked on doors. Newspapers spread the party's message. Posters covered city walls. Campaign airplanes allowed Hitler to visit multiple cities in a single day, making him one of the first politicians to use modern air travel as part of a nationwide campaign. The results were dramatic. In the 1928 election, the Nazi Party held only a small number of seats in the Reichstag, Germany's parliament. Just 2 years later, amid the worsening economic crisis, its support surged. By 1932, it had become the largest political party in the Reichstag. Yet Hitler was still not Germany's leader. President Paul von Hindenburg, an aging war hero, remained reluctant to appoint him chancellor. Many influential conservatives believed they could use Hitler's popularity while keeping him under control. Behind closed doors, politicians negotiated alliances, calculated risks, and searched for a government capable of surviving. Some believed bringing Hitler into power would stabilize Germany. Others warned that it would place democracy in grave danger. On January 30, 1933, President Hindenburg made his decision. Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany. Supporters celebrated in the streets with torchlight processions through Berlin. To many, it looked like the beginning of national renewal. Few realized they were witnessing the beginning of one of history's darkest chapters. Hitler had reached power through constitutional means. Now came the question that would define the 20th century. Would he govern within Germany's democratic system? Or would he destroy it from the inside? The answer would come faster than anyone expected.